Greenhouse people? I am your Tech on Demand host, Bill Calkins, and if you're listening or watching in real time, plans for 2026 are most likely underway, and before we know it, orders will be placed for spring production. Starcluster and Starcluster Cascade Pentas from Syngenta might not be new names to some of you, but perhaps you haven't ventured into the world of vegetative pentas yet, or are looking to add impact to your premium programs, combos, baskets, and both of these are really cool options, as are any pentas really, because today's consumers love the star-shaped flowers and the versatility of pentas in general. And to talk pentas, both vegetative and also seed raised, I'm happy to be joined by a frequent guest on our videos and podcasts, Dr. Jamie Gibson, the technical lead at Syngenta Flowers here in North America, and he works with broker and grower communities in flower trials and crop culture and a whole lot more. I'm sure most of you know Jamie and appreciate his style that I consider equal parts science and technical precision, but balanced with real-world greenhouse application. And Jamie's going to take a deep dive into Pentas production in this Tech on Demand video and podcast episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Tech on Demand podcast on your favorite app like Apple, Spotify, and Google, and find dozens of videos on our YouTube channel. But without further ado, Dr. Jamie Gibson, welcome to Tech on Demand.
Thank you, Bill. Great to be back. Always enjoy these.
For sure, for sure. And why don't you go ahead and share your screen and then take us through some of the best practices that you work with growers on when producing pentas, because Starcluster and the Cascade type are the focus, but I think you also want to discuss Syngenta's seed range as well, because like many species, I think determining when and where to use the different types is super critical to putting together a winning product mix, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we're fortunate at Syngenta Flowers to have both the vegetative types, the Starcluster, Starcluster Cascade types, and then a few seed series. So we've got a cascading seed series called Beehive with 4 colors. We've just introduced 3 exciting new colors, and the garden trials are really showing really high performance. And then we've had our BeeBrights, which are our more compacts, and we have a little higher vigor series called HoneyCluster, more for gallons or larger containers. So kind of the best of both worlds, really options for the grower. With some folks more comfortable with liner, doing more of a kind of a high-end retail product with the star clusters, and then kind of your bread and butter, just kind of coasting with that bedding plan approach with the BeeBrights and honey clusters. So good mix of series for the growers.
Sounds good. And we see these moving north. Like in my opinion, it's a traditional southern annual, but I see more and more every year in garden centers up here in the Midwest and across North America. Is that, am I seeing things, or is that kind of the way it's been moving?
Absolutely. And there's been a little bit of caution early on, kind of a hesitation, sometimes cool or wet summers for north. They've been a little hesitant to kind of go that, but as we see this plant being more drought tolerant, more heat and humidity, just loves that type of environment. This is Egyptian starflower, right? So This thing really loves the heat, and it has really long-term post-harvest life in the garden center because of those big, gorgeous umbels that it produces.
Okay, cool. Well, it's good to see more up north.
Yeah, and we're going to show a few tips within this slide set to show, how you could take advantage of maybe an aged liner to grow it faster and finish. So you're putting just more time on the young plant, and then you don't have to use so many resources and inputs in order to finish out these pentas for the garden center.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. So within Syngenta Flowers, we've just revised our website. It's a little more user-friendly. It's got nice searchable functions. And one of those searchable functions is the culture guides. And in Syngenta Flowers, every time we launch a new series, we make sure the culture guide is up, relevant information, all the new trialing discoveries and insights are built into these culture guides, everything from the garden specs to propagation to production, pests that threaten the crop, and also the insects as well as the diseases. So the culture guides are up for all of the series in Pentas, and they're quite accessible. You can go in, you can actually search, you can type in Pentas, and all of the series spit out. You can click on any one of those series and identify the culture guides. High-res images now online, availability, all those links are there on the website.
Love all the resources. I'll link to those in the show notes for sure. And definitely encourage the viewers and listeners to check out Syngenta's website to see more.
So yeah, when you look at the number of series, practicality wise, where do you start? Which ones do you grow in baskets? Which ones do you grow more in smaller containers? And this is just an example of different series with one particular color. We have whites in all of the different series. And the series I don't have up here on this slide is the HoneyCluster, which is basically that seed, moderate to larger vigor for larger containers. But you can see on the left-hand side, this Beehive, this cascading seed series, now 4 colors, and you compare it to BeeBright, which is more compact. It's going to kind of stay in its lane in that container size. Maybe it's a pint, maybe it's a pack, large pack, maybe a 4-inch. Those are really your options there. When you look at the vegetative types, we've got them here on the right side compared to the Beehive. These are more of that basket approach. You can see the Starcluster Cascade, much like our Bandalista lantana, it fills fast. It kind of spreads and then it begins to tease over the pot rim to give you that cascading effect. Whereas the Starcluster is a little more upright. It's probably built more for that gallon, 6-inch, more high density container. Really, those cascades give you that ability to fill the basket and start to spread on the vegetative side. Because these crops don't have an overly aggressive habit like the Beehive, which really starts to branch and break because it doesn't require a pinch. The Starclusters are going to take roughly about 10 weeks, and they're going to require maybe one more plant per basket in order to kind of give you that retail look. Whereas the Beehive, you could put 3 288 plugs in this particular container size, and then you get the fill. And when you look at Starcluster Beehive, you're pretty much growing these about the same time, roughly about a 10-week program given proper temperature, but this just gives you those options. And when we look at how many plants per pot, all of that is broken down within the culture guide to give the grower specific protocol regimens for production. The potential for Pentas is tremendous, from seed to vegetative. And here's just kind of some interesting new looks of the use of Pentas. On the left-hand side, we've got our traditional quarts and our packs, pints, for these border type seed BeeBrights, and then we can boost up that vigor in these large programmable HoneyCluster containers. This is a gorgeous crop I experienced this past summer, and it just really looked nice for that season extender. The grower could basically program these the way they want because they kind of program the seed plug all the way to finish. But look where we're also taking seed Pentas, mumbos, right? The old school mumbo. Here, this is with a nice bronze. This is a combination with some celosia, some bright spark celosia as the upright. We're putting in Beehive as kind of that spiller in that mumbo. So you've got kind of those gorgeous bronzes and with that red, and then you have that kind of natural characteristic of the Beehive kind of cascading over the container for more of that high-end retail look with mums, just to kind of take it to that next dimension. The bottom picture here is Starcluster Cascades, where we're seeing in garden performance, really you get that pendulous habit, that tease over the container and basket. But for the grower, it's production efficiency, faster to fill, great for those baskets. And then the final one I want to mention is the patio playbook approach, where these aren't necessarily quick combos, but they're using multi-species in the container. One that we found really very successful is the blending of these vegetative Nirvana vinca in with Starcluster and Starcluster Cascade. They really play well with one another, especially the Cascades. They give you those different tones of pinks and whites, even blending them with some of these novelty Nirvana colors. It really just gives you that nice classy look for that high-end retail for the season extending experience. And then we've now started to blend the new Fanatics Scavola, the new series that basically replaced Bombay, now using the Fanatics pink here with this Starcluster Cascade pink. Pink is really striking. Just one monochromatic color, but very gorgeous vigor and really does well all season long up until frost, even taking on some cases very light frost in the garden.
Wow, and I love the way that this actual flower form, the star types on the pentas look in combos because other like the foliage can kind of get through a little bit with the other combination plants, and that's great. And I love that fall combo with the celosia and the garden mum. That's really sharp.
More to come on combos. That's kind of the theme these days with a lot of
Awesome.
breeding companies, is to kind of take it to that next level to show the potential, that retail potential. Yeah, so starting off with the vegetative pentas, in Starcluster Cascade, we have 4 colors. In Starcluster, the uprights, we have 8 colors, very unique colors like violets, apple blossom, rose, thicker foliage, really durable, tough to handle that heat and humidity of the summer. But look at the umbel size on these things. It's almost hydrangea-like and just really classy, nice for that season extending period. And the great thing about these pentas is the pollinators love them. When you get a mass of butterflies just feeding in on the nectar, hummingbirds coming in, I mean, it's just an exciting plant all the way through the summer, up way into the frost time period. For many years, the star clusters have been grown by the southern growers. They've really gotten in a rhythm. They know their production plan. They know kind of the sweet spots of production, whether it's 6-inch or gallon or these kind of 10-inch patio pots where they can feature those in retail. Baskets, that upright look with that big textured foliage and those huge striking umbels. It really does present a nice show. And I think they've got their protocols down, and they can take advantage of those warmer temperatures. They know they don't have to necessarily worry about heating. Now, having said that, a lot of northern growers are tinkering with pentas as well. And this is a great striking crop that came out of Neil Mass greenhouses there in Grand Rapids, where they just produce this gorgeous star cluster gallon crop, upright crop, bright, just really brilliance, brought those umbel shapes. I mean, the plants must have just sold off the shelf so quickly with this new star cluster rose that was launched many years ago. Great vigor, great garden performance, really a great pollinator plant too. So northern growers can do it. And that's the message is, don't be bashful about the temperatures, about kind of these cooler, wet summers. We know that we're not getting any cooler in summers, right? So
Right.
having these plants in the pipeline and the portfolio is critical. The big mention about these umbels is that post-harvest life. Typically a gallon, 6-inch is finishing within about 8 weeks. This is 10 weeks. This is 2 weeks
Wow.
post-finish. And look at the full maximum potential of these umbels expanding out and really staying intact, not much shatter, very limited botrytis. For the most part, pentas are very durable. They don't really experience a lot of those disease pressures that some of our more foliage susceptible species have. But the use of Alesco, the silver nitrate product, is encouraged on pentas. It's fairly ethylene tolerant, but still applying it will definitely give it some more post-harvest life. So the message here, hydrangea-like umbels, real showy, bringing the customer to the retail bench with the star cluster.
They do. They look tough. The foliage looks so healthy. I mean, really, I think at retail, having that shelf life, having that durability, they're going to hold up. They're going to continue to look good. They'll sell. I mean, that picture you showed from Neil Mast is stunning. But yeah, to me, it's just that healthy foliage, big, tough plant. That's, I think, what shoppers are looking for these days.
And the good news is the pH doesn't have to be super high on the vegetative pentas. We'll get into those details here shortly. So you can grow these at a pH lower than 6. So you get that nice foliar tone. They're moderate feeders. And their foliage is almost as attractive as the flower.
Wow.
So going into, propagation tips and tricks, the culture guide is going to cover everything. And I don't want to go line by line here. I just want to mention out some of the keynotes, some of those big tips for growers that are thinking about entertaining pentas in their lineup. They like the heat, right? So you got to have those warm bottom heat temperatures closer to 74 degrees than 72. We actually encourage most root and cells to bring in these vegetative pentas after week 6, especially the northern growers. Those northern growers, if they're bringing them in too early, there's always the risk of cold chain damage. All these polar vortexes that sometimes occur in January and February can wreak havoc in shipping. delays, ice storms, things like that. So week 6 kind of gives you that break point for propagation, and you can still achieve Mother's Day finish with a week 6 stick. Rooting in a 102, 105 cell tray, easy, about 5 to 6 weeks, given the bottom heat temperatures. So, you no doubt can get unrooted cuttings, but callus cuttings are offered by the Guatemalan farm in Capac, and this produces maybe a little discolored look. Oftentimes it's a little concerning. Rest assured, it's very healthy callus. Pentas have a unique pigment in their roots called Xanthophyll, the yellow pigmentation. And so that's why sometimes you sometimes get some concern that there might be something going on. And rest assured, that's just the pigmentation of the root system and those root initials coming out of the callus.
What other species have that? Do you know any other offhand?
Let's see. Boy, that's a great, let's see. I mean, go from a woody shrub standpoint,
Okay.
Barberry, if you've ever dug a barberry up, you'll see some of those yellowish roots, and that's the xanthophylls in those
It's interesting.
in those structures. Yeah.
So if you see that on your callus cuttings, don't worry.
That's right. You're
All
fine.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
You can see the small root initials come out,
Mhm.
and those root initials should move out within about 2 to 3 days after stick. A couple of other points in propagation. B9 is the preferred PGR. It just kind of keeps the tone and stack. But the big one is the pinch. So oftentimes we'll get the question, can you do Florel? Can you do configure for branching to get branching? Well, we've learned straight off the bat that it's got to be a hard pinch of the flower stem. And Pentas, these Starcluster Cascades, are facultative long day plants. So they're going to flower, especially if lighting is in propagation, they're going to flower faster. And what we want to make mention is relax, let that flower stem actually develop a little bit, the peduncle, a little bit of growth on that flower stem. And then you can get in with trimmers or some snips and you cut that flower stem off. And what happens sometimes is propagators will just kind of roll out the buds as they form and prop, and that's really discouraged. We really want you to get a hard pinch of that flower stem. So just maybe wait till about week 3.5, 4, and then go in and give that hard pinch. And it's very amazing. As soon as you do that hard pinch, quite quickly, those lateral breaks start to push out from the sides. And that's where you would want to incorporate maybe a little bit of bonsai. You can do a light bonsai drench or a sprench, and that just kind of keeps those lateral breaks in check. They can really push and accelerate quite quickly in warm propagation environments. So that's what we're mentioning here is be ready with that PGR after that hard pinch of the flower stem, okay? So I was mentioning, cold chain, and this is one of the big things about Pentas. This is why we encourage, post week 6 receipt of cuttings. We know that in the South, a lot of the root and cells are going to bring these in earlier, and that's fine. But what we tend to do in cold chain is we do not ice the boxes that contain Pentas. We start to ice right about week 10. We want to avoid getting below that 40-degree Fahrenheit temperature because that's sometimes where we see this tip burn. So some colors, actually the reds, the lavenders, will oftentimes show a little tip burn right after they're stuck. And that's just because of that little bit of chill, that free moisture that's on the Pentas cuttings, whether it's condensate in the cold chain, you go from warm temperature to cool temperature, much like you're seeing in this graph. And so those chilled temperatures cause this tip burn after stick. So what we've tried to do is work with our supply chain to make sure the carriers are avoiding anything below 40 degrees. We use insulation in the boxes. But one other thing that we're starting to do with Pentas during the cooler months, even in summer, right? In summer, they re-ice the boxes, especially to a lot of the crops that are going into the South because they're just growing large numbers of Pentas. You can actually get refrigeration chill, and with the ice, you can actually get down into those 40-degree marks. So what we do is we bundle the cuttings in some dry paper that kind of removes some of the free moisture off the tissue, and it reduces that tip burn. Now, sometimes tip burn is inevitable, and that's where those contact and systemic fungicides work well because we sometimes get some secondary infection and propagation, especially when things are kind of wet. But for the most part, they're quite durable. Even when they get a little tip burn, they kind of power through warm bottom heat temperatures. Here you can see how quickly roots come out about day 11, day 12. You can really start to develop that root ball after about 2.5 weeks. And then remember, I was talking about those umbels start to form, right? In facultative long day, they start to form and develop. You can even see a little color crack in some cases on some of these cuttings. So just wait for that flower stem to come up, give it that pinch, and then you can start to see those lateral breaks and build a really nice, robust, well-branched liner. Pinching, here's an example of when you've gone through the tray and you've done that hard pinch of those flower stems. So this is the Cascade. So this is going to have a little bit more of those breaks at the base just because of its faster fill characteristic. So here we've got the hard pinch, and you can start to see those laterals starting to push up, and that's where those bonsai sprenches are very effective in kind of controlling those lateral shoots. Flowering takes a while, even with an average daily temperature of 69 degrees. And so here, all the way close to 40 days back from market date, from the flowering state of where we're bringing these into retail, you can just start to see that visible bud, that visible umbel developing. And then just after, say, just shy of 3 weeks, you're looking at umbel development, maybe a little bit of cracked color. This is where you're really getting close to market finish. You're starting to regulate the plant to get it ready for retail. So it takes a while. And so, you're heating this greenhouse upwards to, say, 8 to 10 weeks. How could you take advantage of a more well-built liner or a aged liner in order to take some of this heating and resource off? Well, you could do an enhanced liner. And what an enhanced liner is an 8-week, 50-cell vegetative pentas. We've been talking about this for quite a few years now, and we're starting to see some grower trialing and kind of testing the waters to see if they can generate this 5 to 6 week quart or 6-inch crop. And this is the protocol. So for folks evaluating and reviewing this podcast in terms of programming, this would be a key slide in order to see some of the steps you would do. So we're encouraging some of the root and cells to offer this type of 8-week aged pinched liner with kind of showing in dime size umbel at receipt of the tray. And when that grower receives that umbel, they kind of already know, okay, I've got my flower structure built. I've got my body of the liner. Now I just need to make sure I'm heating properly, giving it the proper fertility. And I think I can finish this thing out with 1 liner in a quart or maybe 2 liners in a 6-inch. And you could even tinker around with baskets. They may require a little longer time, but we're finding that this is maybe a sweet spot. Think about geraniums in a 4.5-inch pot or a quart pot, much like that with these vegetative pentas. Taking that enhanced liner and building that quart product is pretty exciting.
Well, and it occurs to me that when you factor in all those costs and the heating and, keeping those around for multiple weeks, could you be using that space in a more efficient way? Could you be, waiting to heat that space and bring these enhanced liners in, and actually the economics would work out in your favor? And the quality and the reduction of losses. Like, there's so much that could factor into making that just a much better decision for a grower, I would think.
Yep, you got the flower, you got the breaks, you're ready to go.
It's already pinched.
It's already pinched and programmed for that kind of that 5 to 6 week program, where you still may require a little growth regulation in the final container. But it's been exciting to see some of the trials. So I have a small trial greenhouse, and I did some initial tinkering with this to look at our Cascades. You can see the liner kind of characteristics. This was kind of a 58 cell, so a little smaller than the 50 cell. Nice hexagonal dimension in the cell size, but you can see a deeper cell, so you got really strong rooting. There you go. The Xanthophyll, see the root coloration is kind of more of that yellow tone. But you've got the Cascades here branched at the base, and then the upright Starclusters. I did a few varieties. I grew these out for 8 weeks and growing them at that temperature for liner production, and then making sure that the liner had at least a visible umbel. Sometimes the umbel expands a little bit larger than a dime. Sometimes it's a little smaller. So just keeping consistent in your propagation is critical. But, you're transplanting this large enhanced liner into a quart. Remember, you still have that time to finish this. So it takes a while for the development and the cracked color and then the florets to start opening. So this enhanced liner looks like it's got some really good legs. And this is kind of the output. This is kind of that finished product. We worked with Neil Mast on this enhanced liner, their trialing team, their innovation team. So here's some of their trays that they were producing. They did some Starcluster Cascades and uprights. So here we have it in their quart containers. Here you can see, you know, if you can target a minimum spec of about 2 umbels opening, or maybe 1 umbel opening and 1 bud coming behind it, much like what we do with geraniums. We think we've got something here. So this cuts down your production time, and you can actually grow this and finish this out 5 weeks in a quart, 6 weeks in a 6-inch, maybe with 2 liners in a containers. We hope, much like what we're doing with our enhanced dipladenia, with maybe a little longer term propagation, it kind of helps achieve that finish time for Mother's Day. If we can target Mother's Day, or even a little bit past Mother's Day for this, instead of waiting for like weeks 21, 22, 23, if we can get it more in that high peak of retail, we can really get more exposure of this garden performer to the consumer public and consumer gardener. So a few more notes on finishing out the vegetative Pentas. Warm temperatures, right? Egyptian star flower, warm temps, average daily temperature. You could certainly put this in the Lantana house or the Scaevola house or the Angelonia house. Maybe you want to even keep it a little bit warmer. Maybe you want to put it in that dipladenia house, but it will produce these flower structures, and you want to watch the irrigation, not over irrigation, because the roots are kind of slow to move, but you don't want to dry this thing down. If you do see some kind of wilting or significant wilting, you can get some dry down, some burn. And the final note here is pH is not as sensitive as the seed crops. So the vegetative crops can actually tolerate a little lower pH. And in fact, we've heard that the Starcluster Cascades, through some trialing of our trialing team, has found that the pH can go maybe a little bit lower than the upright Cascades. So the Cascades can maybe tolerate a little bit lower pH. But my recommendation, stay north of 5.8 to make sure you're not getting into any iron toxicity issues. If you go actually too high with some of these vegetative types, you can actually see interveinal iron deficiency. So that's another big one. Overwatering or super high pH, you can see the opposite. You can see interveinal yellowing of some of the top growth. And so, yeah, you want to have that kind of Goldilocks range of 5.8 to 6.2 for the star clusters. PGR wise, it's B9 early, and then bonsai drenches. You know, everyone thinks, well, my gosh, star clusters, you know, they're slow to grow. But if you've got it in the right conditions, that big umbel starts to form, and you want to prevent top heaviness. A lot of times when we grow these for cultivate during those very warm temperatures of July, we have to do these higher bonsai drenches to kind of keep the plant in check in proportion to the containers. Some of the varieties are kind of quite vigorous, so as high as 3 parts per million can be used as a bonsai drench. And this just shows you again, you of course could pinch the plants in propagation, even in the 105 cell. Some folks don't. They wait until they transplant and it develops that initial flower stem. Remember, Bill, what I was saying, that peduncle? Give that peduncle maybe about an inch, or maybe a little just shy of an inch, maybe about 1.5 centimeters, close to 2 centimeters. Give it a little bit of space, and then give it that hard pinch to guarantee that you're going to break apical dominance, and really you can see those lateral shoots are starting to really form. So that's your goal, is to get 4 nice shoots from that 2-node pinch. Programming, pretty straightforward, you know, very similar to a geranium, but a little warmer production temperatures. You're looking anywhere, say, from 8 to 11 weeks based on container size. Again, you can cut 3 to 4 weeks off if you're using more of the enhanced, longer aged liner, but you definitely got to watch your temperature. Staying on target will keep these timings right. If you're growing them a little too cool, it's going to definitely slow down development. So you really want to be mindful of too cool of a temperature. You can really, really slow down crop production time. And then, yeah, one of the final notes before we kind of wrap up the summary of vegetative Pentas, you know, bonsai drenches are very effective. A few weeks before finish, you can go in. This is a lot of work that was done by Dr. Harvey Lang, formerly with Syngenta Flowers Technical. He did a lot of work of looking at ranges of bonsai drenches, you know, anywhere, say, between 1 to 3 parts per million, depending on the vigor. Most of these will respond to about 2 parts. It'll keep that plant proportionate to the container, and you get the garden performance. If you do too high of a concentration, you really restrict the ultimate potential of these plants in the garden. These really, you want to make these really nice and robust, either in ground or the container. So drenching them too heavy is really going to suppress vigor and garden performance. So yeah, in summary, just a few notes. Enhanced liners are going to help warm temperatures and watch your PGRs. So not too much. Use B9 early. Use those bonsai drenches to kind of keep the plant in check. This particular image on the right-hand side is from Lucas Greenhouses. They do an amazing job building a pre-finished vegetative pentas, and then they have wonderful late May sales, mid to late May sales with a lot of the Starcluster colors, violets, pinks. I mean, all of these look great. And it's almost hydrangea-like, right? It almost gives you that feel.
It also looks perfect to drop into a real premium combo.
Absolutely. Yeah, think about using lantana, angelonia, scavola, mizu, all of those types of warm season crops, even dipladenia, blending the dips in with this stuff. So it makes a great upright or a mounded plant.
Sounds good.
So yeah, you had mentioned the seed, and we're definitely want to hit on seed. Just a few tips and tricks. This, I'm going to go right in, right? Because we talked a lot about the beehives and BeeBrights. I really want to harp on those key notes in propagation and production with seed. And the big one is seed plugs are really challenging to produce with pentas, much like begonias, right? A lot of our specialized propagators do pentas and seed begonia in 288 trays. They've got it down to a science. They know how much time in the chamber, how much time on the bench, warm temperatures. They know the proper media types. They know the droplet size in order to prevent jostling or cover of the seed, making sure that they're patching properly, making sure that they're getting really strong stands of germination. Any type of thing that can impact the initial emergence can really impact fulfillment of the tray. And so this is showing you some of these smalls. Sometimes when the nozzle pressure is pretty high, it can move the seed to one particular part of the cell, and therefore translating to smaller seedlings that can sometimes not make that patch date. And so that impacts the total number of plugs that can be built and certainly slows down efficiency. One big mention, watch the droplet size when irrigating these plugs. Warm temps, again, average daily temperature 68 to 70 degrees in the later stages, right? Warmer temperature, wetter media early. You can drop this down to a moisture stage 4, even down to 2 as the plugs are really developing well into weeks 6, 7, and 8, and then you can use those PGRs to kind of regulate growth. If it's in the right culture environment, it's going to grow really well, and you need to kind of keep those internodes in check and leaf expansion in check. So using B9, even using some of these paclobutrazole sprays upwards to 5 to 10 parts kind of helps kind of settle that plug into a really nice finished plug product for the grower. Just showing you textbook pentas production here in the deep south, uniform laser production, taking advantage of those higher light levels, upwards to 12 moles per day, the DLI having a really big impact on plug health and root vigor, and just avoiding any kind of chlorosis, any kind of sluggish growth in the plugs is critical. So warm temps, really high quality light, great moisture management makes that beautiful plug. And then from a production standpoint, it's warmer temperatures, but there's a range, right? Pentas can tolerate a range. It doesn't need to be overly hot. You can kind of regulate it much like a geranium, right? You can cool it down if you need to regulate growth. If it's getting too aggressive, you can ramp it up a little bit if you need to get some expansion. But again, to target the light levels, closer to 20 moles per day. These are facultative long day plants. So if you need to do supplemental lighting, you can certainly accelerate the flower structure that way. Most of these seed pentas, they're free branching. There's no need for a pinch, and you see the development of the plant and the flower buds as you get closer to market date. Big one, huge. pH management with seed pentas, big. Just like geraniums, just like marigolds, you want to try to keep that pH well above 6.2. So, marigolds, we kind of say 6.1. Geraniums, we kind of say 6.0 and above. Pentas, just to be on the safe side, to avoid that tip burn and blackening. So it's blackened tissue that happens when you get iron levels very high in the tissue. So you want to keep that well above 6.2, at or above 6.2, using calcium nitrate, Calcium also helps build strong shoot production, make sure that the foliage in the shoot tip is expanding properly. You're getting really good flower development. Calcium is being demanded tremendously in that actively growing shoot tips. Calcium nitrate is a nice tool to enhance tone, but also give some calcium, more calcium to the system, and it also keeps the pH up. And then from a PGR standpoint, based on the vigor of the series, typically BeeBrights don't need a lot of PGR because they're more naturally compact, whereas the HoneyClusters are going to need a little bit of B9, maybe a bonsai spray, maybe a drench at the end, or the Beehives, maybe a little toning before you're hanging the basket. So really based on the culture guide and what its recommendations are, use those PGR recommendations to grow the best proportionate to the container. And then we have programming. So in the culture guide, it has the number of weeks, the number of plants per pot, but here you can see, you've got everything from packs all the way to large containers. Certainly we're going to put BeeBrights more in packs and pints and quarts. We're going to put more HoneyCluster in gallons, 6-inch. We're going to put HoneyClusters in these larger containers, and then the Beehives, of course, were built for the baskets. Also, you could put them in quarts as a combination plant, right, where certain customers are going to make a thriller, filler, spiller. They're going to use the Beehives more as a spiller effect in the container. So it gives you those options. It gives you all the programming. And then we always base it on a scenario. What size plug? What's the average temperature to kind of give the grower an idea of the environmental conditions that resulted in these production times.
If a grower was adding Pentas to their program, to whether it was a contract they got from a landscaper or something, whatever reason they're deciding in 2026 to add Pentas to their program, would you just suggest they buy in plugs versus trying to learn how to propagate them themselves?
I would definitely recommend for anyone first timing this, maybe they're, they've done really well in the petunia market. They've done great with marigolds. They're getting comfortable in the rhythm, and they're starting to see a higher demand for these warmer, more drought tolerant type bedding plants. Yeah, buy in the plugs from a specialist. There's great plug producers all across North America that can do a really nice Pentas. Start with a nice plug, get comfortable. It takes a little bit of investment to grow the Pentas, right? You might need a germ chamber, you might need specialized benches and lighting, and make sure your bottom heat temperature. So it may require a little more infrastructure. And like I said, there's tons of great plug suppliers all across the region that can deliver a nice quality Pentas ready to grow.
Makes sense.
So programming's there. Just in summary, watch the pH with the seed Pentas. Be mindful of the series that you're growing when evaluating the type of PGR you're using. And again, it's warm temps. This is more for that summertime, extend the season with a lot of these seed crops, using potentially the vegetative types for more higher end retail. But remember, there's Beehives, there's HoneyClusters that can give you that look as well. It really depends on the right retail spec that you're looking for, depending on the garden center requirements. So yeah, with that, I think that covers our vegetative and our seed tips on Pentas. We've got the culture guides online, but of course, reach out to us on the tech team. We're happy to help. And we've got a lot of great people behind us supporting us on the supply chain side and also on the seed side, seed quality, and our pellet as well. We've definitely seen improvement in our pellet compound with better erosion and better emergence from the media. So that's also helped the popularity of our seed Pentas and fulfillment for the plug grower.
That's awesome. I love hearing about the seed technology, the enhanced liners, just all the work that you and the team put into making sure that the grower who's receiving this has the absolute best chance for success. And it's also fun to see different types of Pentas in the market. You've got the trailing types, you've got the big, vigorous vegetative types. I mean, it really is, it's one of those crops that has multiple uses. And like I said earlier, I think just the flower form, the durability it's right on trend with what today's consumers want. So Pentas have been around for a long time, but it's time for a resurgence, right?
Absolutely. And think hydrangea size umbels to get, it's an alternative to the geranium. While we love our geraniums at Syngenta Flowers, these Pentas umbels are quite attractive. And really can bring the customer to the bench.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, Jamie, thank you as always so much for your time. I always appreciate you and the entire team at Syngenta who delivers solid technical resources. Shout out to your website. The new searchable ability to find culture on your website is great. I've used it myself. I've shared it myself, and I know that growers appreciate that. And you guys are always so happy and willing to work with us whenever we call. So I definitely appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you, Bill.
And a quick reminder, you can find dozens, if not hundreds, of tech-on-demand educational resources online. Send a newsletter every week covering a range of cultural and technical topics. We've created tons of videos for greenhouse professionals of all skill levels, and the podcast is a great way to learn about technical topics on the go. You can subscribe to that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, just about anywhere you find podcasts. And on behalf of Team of Tech on Demand and our friends at Syngenta Flowers, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Take care out there.